Thank you for joining me for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Time is ticking away on a successful resolution to the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline dispute with the state of Michigan. The stakes could not be higher, yet so far, Michigan Governor Whitmer has been impervious to counter-arguments. I've got an excellent panel to discuss this issue today. We have Cody Battershill, who is a founder of Canada Action, a pro-oil and gas advocacy group. And also joining us is Jocelyn Bamford, who is the founder of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
I'd love to get, Cody, let's start with you perhaps. And why don't you give us what you see as the state of play with this Line 5 dispute?
Well, it's quite concerning with the rhetoric that's coming out about shutting it down. It is devoid of the reality of supplying the energy that families need on both sides of the border. This pipeline has been in operation since the 1950s. It was built by the same company that built the Hoover Dam. It is built to an amazing technical standard. It has never had an incident in the straits that the governor talks about being concerned about. And it's supplying airports, businesses, home heating, transportation fuels. It is an absolutely integral part of the everyday lives of families on both sides of the border. And it must continue to operate to prevent serious shortages of energy and a variety of other inputs into products and activities that we all use and do on a daily basis.
Jocelyn Bamford, what's your point of view on this? You're obviously a founder of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers. Give us your take on this.
Yeah, this is going to be absolutely devastating to Ontario. And it's stunning to me that this really is flying under the radar. Everyone should be talking about this. This will result in huge shortages of not only petrol to operate businesses in terms of transportation. It'll cause shortages for people commuting because they need gasoline to commute. It will be in that 1970s when we had OPEC shortages all over again. And the fact that people aren't alarmed about this is deeply concerning. Think about all of the industry that rely on these things. Forklift trucks, they're all propane operated. The airport in Toronto gets the majority of their fuel from Line 5. Think of transportation. We need to get our products to market. It'll cause huge shortages in gasoline, and that's going to cause shortages in getting product to market and also getting supplies in Ontario from different parts of Ontario. Not to mention people that are remotely operating where they need propane to run and operate their businesses because they're not on natural gas. These are all going to be devastating for industry, not to mention the average Ontario family.
Cody Battershill, Jocelyn has sort of outlined the consequences of this. It sounds like it could be something if this pipeline is no more, obviously they'll be using trucks or something. So it's not as if this is going to be an environmentally sound process. There's still going to be an environmental impact, even if you shut down this pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. The pipeline transports about 540,000 barrels per day of oil and natural gas liquids. That is supplying about 50% of Quebec and Ontario's gasoline and about 55% of Michigan's statewide propane. And so it's an enormous volume of product that would need to then be moved by other means. And so what does that entail? It entails hundreds, thousands of trucks, hundreds and thousands of rail cars. And certainly when you look at the pipeline's record operating for about 65 years without incident, the way that it was constructed and the way that proponents of the pipeline are sort of trying to work towards a solution to make everyone feel like there's a balanced meet in the middle on this, which includes keeping the pipeline operating, I just don't think that the ask that we shut it down and we just assume that we're going to be able to get that much supply through these other sources is going to somehow, in some magical world, have an environmental positive impact. It's not. It's going to be detrimental to families. It's detrimental to the environment.
Sure. And we're back here at Boom and Bust with myself as host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum. We've got our panel talking about the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline. Cody, Battershill, founder of Canada Action. I had to cut you off for the break, but please continue with your thought.
Well, I just thought it was really concerning that recently Michigan declared a local state of energy emergency because of access to propane due to some inclement weather and due to concern that they weren't going to be able to get the supply they needed to all of the citizens of the state. And that's what we're sleepwalking into with shutting down Line 5. And I totally agree with Jocelyn that this issue is flying under the radar. We should all be talking about this in Canada and also in the United States. A perfect example for us to work together, find some common ground, be balanced, continue to support families, keep the pipeline operating, and it has a positive impact versus the alternative on the environment.
Jocelyn, Bamford, obviously this is of great concern to your membership, the manufacturing community. Have you been having discussions with, let's say, the government of Ontario or the government of Canada about the necessity of keeping this pipeline open?
Yeah, absolutely. We keep raising the alarm bells, and certainly Dan McTagg, who sits on our board, from Canadians for Affordable Energy, has been leading the charge to make sure that everybody knows the devastating impact of this. And it's not just on shortages, it's on jobs, it's on the cost. So Dan tells me that $100 fill up for a gas tank is going to go to $180. So can you imagine the impact on families, commuters in the 905 if this happens? And that's just assuming that you'll be able to get gas. There'll be lineups, there'll be shortages. It'll be like in the 1970s where, the gas stations were shut down because they didn't have any supply. And then let's talk about jobs. This is going to devastate Sarnia. The petrochemical industry in there will be basically shut down because they won't have any supply to work with. So it's going to devastate jobs. It's going to cost you in your pocketbook an exorbitant amount that people haven't even begun to think about. It's going to destroy jobs in not only rural Ontario, but in agriculture. And let's talk about Quebec and the Eastern Maritimes also rely on the Line 5 to get their propane. So if you have a property that's not on natural gas or electricity and you're on propane, be prepared to have shortages, and it's going to be absolutely devastating. And again, I'm stunned that the mainstream media is not talking about it. I'm stunned that our federal government seems, lukewarm about discussing this when it's going to be absolutely devastating. And we really need to raise the alarm bells and get Canadians awake from their slumber, because just as Cody had pointed out, this is going to be worse from the environment. The amount of trucks is 2,000 trucks and 800 rail cars making a one-way trip to fulfill this backlog. And so they don't even have the capacity. So, we're in real trouble here, and we need to really focus on making sure that this doesn't happen.
Cody, we got about a minute and a half before the break, but tell me a little bit about Canada Action. Are you also raising the alarm as Jocelyn's organization is?
Yeah, we absolutely are. So people can go to keepline5.com and join in the conversation on social media. It is so important that we all remember we are a part of the soft-spoken majority trying to feed our families, keep our communities moving, trying to support our national economy, and we can all participate in this conversation in a positive way to grow awareness. It is so important.
And are you getting some good feedback? Are people starting to listen?
Yeah, we are getting good feedback. And, Canadians across the country need to remember we're all in this together. And there's supporters of pipelines in Ontario and in Quebec just because we've seen previous pipelines that haven't necessarily worked out. These are more complicated discussions. Right now, we're talking about families, keeping the heat on, keeping the lights on, keeping the family employed. And we all need to rally together for Line 5. It's a great example to ensure all Canadians understand that even when we don't realize it, pipelines keep our economy and our daily lives moving, and they make it possible.
Let's continue our discussion after the break. I'm speaking with Jocelyn Bamford, of course, of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers, and Cody Battershill, who is the founder of Canada Action. We'll be right back with some more discussion of this important issue about Line 5 pipeline after this break. Please stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum. We're talking about Enbridge Line 5 pipeline and how important it is for not only the Ontario and Quebec economies, but generally for the Canadian economy as well. Cody, back to you. One of the things you said really struck home with me, because this actually is almost like a tie-in. Like this almost helps with your broader advocacy, because when you're talking about what the huge impact is for everyday citizens if these products are not available, it also kind of lends credence to some of your other concerns about those who would like to shut down Canada's oil and gas industry. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is really concerning to see this continued attack on Canada's responsibly produced oil and gas industry and many of our other resources. When we think about, as a country, resources, and specifically oil and gas, it's our number one export. It's a gigantic contributor to our government revenues, contributing about $500 billion since the year 2000. This is oil and gas. And this is produced by the women and men in our Canadian communities and in numerous provinces to the highest global standards for environment, for social, and for governance metrics. We are taking action to reduce emissions. We are investing in clean technology, and we absolutely should be supporting our local Team Canada produced resources, specifically energy, forestry, mining, ag, all of it. And all of those items makes everything we have, everything we're wearing, everything we're going to do today possible. We owe those workers our appreciation as a strong part of the Canadian economy, and it is concerning to continue to see these attacks against our ESG environmental leading industry with no regard for the alternate sources of supply that will easily take that market share, and who also continue to eat our lunch around the world, supplying other countries that would love to buy from Canada but can't because we've had all these pipeline projects that have been obstructed.
Jocelyn Bamford, I recently had on Boom and Bust another guest talking about Line 5. It was Congressman Jack Bergman, who represents the Upper Peninsula, Michigan District 1 in the U.S. Congress. And it was very clear from my interview of him that there's a lot of Michiganders, as they're known, a lot of Michiganders who are going to be deeply affected by this policy of the governor as well. Is that something that you're starting to do? Is to have a dialogue with on both sides of the border on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all part of a well-planned, well-executed attack on our resource sector. And I think that people don't recognize and understand how important the resource sector is to Ontario manufacturing. If you look on my street in Scarborough, there's 4 companies that do supply products and services for the resource sector. So when you take down the resource sector, you take down manufacturing, because they are interconnected. And you really look at it as an ecosystem. So imagine what happens when a pipeline goes through. And when a pipeline goes through, they need a pipe fabricated. A lot of times it's fabricated here in Ontario, and then it goes to be coated. And so a company like mine will coat the pipe, and then it goes onto a flatbed, and it's transported across the country. And that truck driver might stop and eat along the way, and maybe he buys a gift or a present for someone in his family. And he stops to eat along the way. And so when you look at that spoken wheel around the resource sector, you see how much it impacts everything. So we have an environmental, well-organized environmental group that's attacking our very clean industry. And the tragedy of that is that our clean natural resources can be the solution to a cleaner planet. We can take our clean liquefied natural gas and have China and India come off coal and have prosperity here in Canada. And why that is not apparent to everybody is beyond me. So we can, it's not a zero-sum game. It's us contributing best practices to the world and having prosperity in a clean environment. So, we see these environmental groups, whether they're not well educated or they just prey on people's emotions, going after the resource sector, the manufacturing sector, now the plastic sector by having the federal government declare plastics as toxic, which is really just a proxy war on the resource sector. So when you take the second and third GDP contributors, which are manufacturing and the resource sector, down, where are you going to replace it? Where are our kids going to work? Where are we going to get taxes to build hospitals and roads? So there needs to be a thoughtful discussion on all of this.
And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm with Cody Battershill. He's the founder of Canada Action, and Jocelyn Bamford, who is the founder of the coalition of concerned manufacturers, talking about Enbridge Line 5 pipeline and its impact and importance for Canada. Cody, I just want to sort of launch off something that Jocelyn said before the break and just ask you, obviously you're battling and dealing with extreme environmentalism all the time. You talked about the ESG goals that are being met by the oil and gas sector, and yet there's clearly a well-financed, well-organized group of people who want to shut down the entire sector. So this is another case in point, I would argue. Certainly when talking to Congressman Bergman, who's albeit a Republican congressman, the governor of Michigan is a Democrat, he was saying, look, this is for the well-being of Michigan to keep this pipeline open. So it's not just Ontarians and Canadians saying that. All of which is to say, what does this say, this kind of debate and battle, what does it say about the forces that you're up against, these extreme environmentalist forces?
Well, what I would say is that first and foremost, as Canadians, we should be proud of our people, our record, and our resources. And the more we speak up as a part of this conversation, the more we're contributing to the understanding that resources, just like Jocelyn said, is a gigantic contributor to manufacturing, export, business investment, government revenues, jobs for our country, for our Canadian families. When we think of a job, we think of a Canadian family putting food on the table. It is so important we work together. I would also like to make a quick example with Keystone XL. Bill McKibben from 350.org said in an interview with Rolling Stone that part of the Keystone XL attack was to show the climate change movement, to give it a symbolic win. And I don't think we should be playing around with symbolic wins that may not actually benefit the environment and that will 100% put Canadian families at a disadvantage. Because when you look at Keystone XL, since that pipeline first came under attack from Bill McKibben's incredibly well-funded organization, they actually originally got some of their money from an oil company, Legacy. But since that happened, who has benefited? Mm-hmm. Global oil demand has increased. It hasn't kept a single barrel of oil in the ground. It has kept Canada's responsibly produced oil selling at a discount. And it's supported other suppliers like Venezuela, Mexico, Ecuador, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. Other heavy oil suppliers to the United States have benefited. So this is the conversation we need to get back to. Let's not talk about symbolism. Let's talk about real action. And that's what we're doing in Canada with our responsibly produced resource sector, taking action, reducing our impact, supporting government revenues for our social services, and being there for Canadian families and for our children to have a future in our great country.
Jocelyn Bamford, we've got just over a minute to go. I'll give you the last word. How do we tackle some of these extreme environmentalism ideas that seem to be all around us?
Well, it starts with education. We have demonstrated that people are opinions will be changed when they're shown the real facts. And the facts are that with not having affordable energy, with having things like carbon tax and clean fuel standards, we are driving industry out of Canada. And when we drive industry out of Canada, we drive them into other areas that don't have the environmental standards that we have in Canada. So again, we're decreasing our prosperity, we're pushing jobs out, and we're having a dirtier planet. And that sounds like a lose-lose when we could have a win-win here. So we need to get pipelines through. We need to have affordable energy so that we can keep jobs here in Canada and we can have places for our kids to work and really and a cleaner planet. And that's what it's all about. So we need to really focus on the win-win and not fall prey to these environmentalist extremists that are not telling us the real story.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that. It clearly is a very important story, and it's going to be playing out over the next couple of months. I want to thank Cody Battershill and Jocelyn Bamford for being on my program.
Thank you.
As I said at the outset, time is ticking on this very important issue of Enbridge Line 5, this pipeline that basically keeps our houses warm and keeps the planes in the air and so on. Clearly, there is starting to be a group of Canadians who are concerned enough that they want to advocate for it. We listened to a couple of them on this program today. So we'll be following this issue. This will not be the last show on Enbridge Line 5. Stay with us as we continue to tackle this issue.